Good morning. Welcome. And while we're waiting for people to join in, I'll go ahead and introduce myself real quick before I go into our slide presentation. So, welcome to Sunset Learning today. My name is Ted Trentler. I am a champion AWS authorized instructor, and all that means is that the word champion there means is that I teach a variety of AWS courses across a few different disciplines with Sunset Learning. So thought I'd mention that, do my little brief intro there. Is going to be on how AWS certification maps to job roles. And what I really want to spend some time talking about in this presentation are some of the newer cloud-focused roles that we're seeing in environments. And then how, what is AWS certification? How does it specifically map to these and existing job roles that are out there in the marketplace? So we look at my agenda for what we're going to talk about. Here we are in the intro. I'm going to talk about these cloudy job roles. What are these new roles? What are existing roles? How do they map to AWS certifications? And what are these AWS certifications? Talk a little bit about the benefits of AWS certification. And then specifically into some job mappings to certification. I'll summarize and I'll talk a little bit about some of our course offerings that we have available and where to find more information. Let's start by talking about cloud-based job roles.
Do that.
Hi there.
May do that.
So one of the first roles that I'm going to talk about is the cloud architect role. And this is a new position that we see in a lot of organizations. And, this is a position that directly connects both with engineers as well as clients in services organizations. And this is our interface between the technical leadership and the engineers or our cloud network engineers. So this is the person that really knows the cloud. One of the terms that I like to use is, when I started doing IT, I started back in the Novell days, and I got my Novell certification, then I got my Microsoft certification, became a network engineer, and got my Cisco certifications. When we look at the cloud and this architect role, the person we want for that role isn't really a know-it-all. We want someone that's going to be more of a learn-it-all. Okay, someone who has the ability to learn these new skills because the cloud is rapidly changing. AWS has over 240 services available. So who can rapidly get this vocabulary and start to interface with our other stakeholders in our business? So this cloud architect has become it's sort of a newer term, but this is a very important role in our organizations. The next role I'm going to talk about is the Sysops administrator. And this is the person who's responsible, or person or persons who are responsible for deploying, operating, and managing our systems in this AWS platform. The cloud architect can talk about how we deploy these systems and maybe assist with the initial deployment, but how do we patch them? How do we do day-to-day management of them? How do we update them? Okay, so Sysops into the cloud with AWS requires a lot of familiarity with AWS systems, services, and security as well. We'll talk about that as we move on. Another popular role these days, or one that we see a lot of traction on, is our cloud developer. So we may have on-staff developers who know Node.js, Java, Python, and that's great. How do you apply that to your cloud workloads? How do you build a serverless infrastructure using Lambda? And taking these development skills and applying them to the infrastructure of the cloud. And how do we know about, what is the, for lack of a better word, what is the organization of the cloud? So a lot of our cloud developer types of courses and certifications, I like to think of as language independent, We're talking more about the architecture of the cloud and the resources in AWS for developers. DevOps engineer. When we look at continuous integration, continuous deployment or development, CI/CD, how do we bring these workloads to the cloud? How do we bring a DevOps methodology into AWS? So we have, when we talk about a DevOps engineer, this is someone that interfaces with our developers and our architects to help keep these loads continually running in the cloud. We also have sales and purchasing. And when I think about sales and purchasing, if we are a professional services company, we have to sell our product, and it may be housed in the cloud, and we need to be able to talk about the unique properties that the cloud brings to our products. Our purchasing manager, I really like to think of this as, hand in hand with our accounting specialist who pays for this. Okay? When we start migrating our workloads to AWS, we start moving from a CapEx environment to an OpEx environment. Okay, I'm not budgeting thousands of dollars for servers and single purchases anymore. We're moving this more to a monthly expense. Well, now we're going to receive these, possibly quite large bills from AWS. How do we decipher these? How do we make sense of which workloads are important? How do we manage cost centers? This is a huge new role when we're talking about significant expenditure on a monthly basis. How do we make sure that we're not paying for unused instances? Database administration in the cloud is different as well. While we have the ability to run virtual machines or instances in AWS, Amazon provides a lot of cloud native database managed services that are quite different. And by adopting some of these services, we can improve resilience and reliance of our applications. Other roles we'll talk about: network engineer. That's a traditional role, but now we have to learn the cloud technology and the AWS technology, VPCs, route groups. How do subnets work in the cloud? How do we interface our on-prem experience with AWS? How do I deliver backups? Systems integrators as well. And then security in the cloud has additional layers. Again, security is something that we layer in, and we want to look at security at every level. We have secure people that are responsible for security in our environment. How do we secure the cloud, and how do we ensure that we have security measures in the cloud? So these are some of the roles that we see in the cloud. I'm going to talk specifically about some of the AWS certifications and how they map up, how these roles would fit in, and where there are certification tracks that fit these roles. So what are these AWS certifications? Well, there are 11 different AWS certifications. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here talking about each of them and sort of where they fit. And when we look at these, we can sort of group these into 4 different classifications. The first is a foundational certification. That would be the Cloud Practitioner, or the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner certification. This is a great entry-level cert. I think of this as, how do I get the terminology of the AWS cloud? How do I understand the vocabulary? At Sunset Learning, we offer a 1-day course. There are no labs, just going through and learning the vocabulary and the principles of good cloud deployment. And we'll talk about the job roles that are associated with this in just a moment. There are associate level certifications, and there are 3 of them: the Solutions Architect Associate, the Sysops Administrator Associate, the AWS Certified Developer Associate. And we look at these as entry-level sort of certifications for these types of roles. We'll talk about the specific jobs related to these certifications in a moment. One thing I would like to note about all of these associate level certifications, or all of the certifications in general, you can take them in any order. You don't have to have one as a prerequisite to the other. We might recommend that you take an associate level exam to validate your knowledge before you go on to a professional level exam, but there is no prescribed order. You can take these in any order that you like. And we have 2 professional level certifications, the Solutions Architect Professional, which adds on to our depth of knowledge for the Solutions Architect Associate, and the DevOps Engineer Professional, which is a professional level certification for people doing development tasks and systems operation tasks. Run these in a bit as well. AWS also offers 5 different certifications that they call specialty certifications, a deep dive into other topics, such as database. Now, they know your database technology very well that you're using. AWS has probably a dozen different relational databases, as well as NoSQL databases and hosted services that we offer. So it's a deep dive: security, machine learning, advanced networking, data analytics. And we'll talk more about where these fit in and what job roles work with these as well. But there are 11 different current certifications that you can obtain. Now, what's the benefit of this? Why get AWS certifications? Well, I think some of the benefits for a corporation for AWS certification, number one, validate our staff's technical skills. A certification doesn't mean someone doesn't have the, knows not to turn off an instance in the middle of a production day. Okay, but we want to make sure that people that we bring into our organization have a baseline of knowledge and at least know the vocabulary. I'll be one of the first people to tell you that even if you have the certification, there is a lot more to learn, be an expert in any of these fields. But we find that as people gain certification, we improve their performance. Okay, they perform better. They're not hunting and pecking as much. They learn best practices for these environments. Okay. Other things that we get with certification, we can satisfy AWS partner requirements. Maybe your company is involved in or looking to resell services through the AWS marketplace. Well, you have to have a partner and X amount of people certified to be able to provide that. And the big thing that we get having certified individuals on staff is a confidence in our corporate cloud strategy. We know that the people that we are handing over responsibility for implementing a cloud migration or a cloud strategy have an understanding of the cloud and the different nuances of it, from security to cost, best practices, and so on. Now, on the right of the slide up here, there are a list of things that the participants, that the certified individual get. With all of the AWS certification, you get a little digital badge. Okay, which is nice, for your social media profiles and things of that nature. And you can show, that, hey, I am certified. Another aspect another thing that we get is an exam discount. Every time you pass an exam, you get a 50% off coupon for your next exam. Okay, so you can either use that discount to, when it comes time 3 years from now, to renew a certification, as well as for your next exam. Every time you pass an exam, they'll give you a coupon for a free practice exam for your next exam. So sort of ensure that you're going to pass before you spend the money for an exam. There's an AWS certified store, so you can get logoed merchandise. So you get, a shirt like this. I'm not a model, but and there's also an AWS certified global community. So there's a LinkedIn community where you can chat with other certified individuals. Sort of cool. There's also things like event recognition. When we go to AWS conferences like reInvent, there are lounges for certified individuals. Sort of cool. And free swag and stuff like that. So a lot of benefits to certification. The most important benefit is the ability to provide workloads in AWS competently. So going back to all of these 11 certifications, how do these map to different job roles? What roles relate to these different certifications? I'd like to start with the Cloud Practitioner. And the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner is AWS's newest certification, and it is an entry-level certification. I put on this slide some of the domains that are covered in this cert. So we talk about the technology of the cloud, cloud concepts, security and compliance, and billing and pricing. When we talk about who this certification is built for, it's basically a one-day class, a few days of study. In addition, I always think there's study associated with any of these certifications. But this is a good entry-level certification for anyone that has to work with the cloud. And so if we have sales personnel, entry-level technical folks, managerial folks who are responsible for telling people what to do in the cloud, removing this workload, I want my managers to understand a little bit about the cloud, as well as people that are responsible for billing, okay, or paying the bills, purchasing. These people should know a little bit about how to go in and look at the AWS console and find out the answers to their billing questions, start to understand this environment. So this is what I think of as a very good start, the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner certification. And when I really look at the roles that map to this certification, it could be anyone. Now, as we move through our certifications, the next one up is the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate. This is by far the most popular certification with AWS. And the reason why it is when I look at what a AWS Solutions Architect Associate does, is they manage deployments. Now, if we look at the AWS Management Console, and I'm going to try and switch my screen here to the Management Console here. So this is AWS's web-based management console. The issue with this web-based management console is that, I can see my recently visited services here, but there's over 240 different services that AWS offers. So the challenge that we have as we're migrating to the cloud is your boss says, hey, let's migrate to the cloud. Great. How do I do that? What services do I use? That's where I really think the AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam really sort of validates your knowledge, and you know what the most popular services are and how to use them and do a migration to them. Cover things like EC2, S3, IAM, security management. Okay, but what are our most popular services? Okay, what are people actually doing in the cloud? That's what the Solutions Architect Associate really tests on. Bring back my slide here. Okay, so what this validates is that people have knowledge on how to deploy and architect secure and robust solutions using AWS technologies. Okay, and this course goes through, and the certification goes through best practices. Okay, as well as talking about how we implement. What are some of the best ways to implement? So when we look at different job roles where this Solutions Architect Associate is valuable, we're going to recommend this as an entry point for most technical level people that are going to be doing daily work in AWS. So this could be the cloud architect role, but it could also be a Sysops administrator. Now, we do have a Sysops administrator associate exam as well. Talk about that. If I had to choose one and I did just Sysops, maybe I'd choose that other one as well. But if you're developing in the cloud, if you're doing DevOps, if you're a project manager, a database administrator, this course covers database deployment for both SQL and NoSQL databases, gives you a little of each. If you're doing networking in the cloud, your systems integrator, if you're dealing with any data or security, this is where you start. The exam is 65 questions. They give you, it costs $150. That's list price. Again, if you take the Cloud Practitioner exam first, they'll give you a 50% off discount. But they'll give you 130 minutes to take this, and it is administered either online or at a testing center. With the advent of the pandemic, they've moved a lot of the testing to online proctoring, and you can do that. You just have to take pictures of, have a webcam, take pictures of your space, and they will monitor you while you take your exam. Some people, I actually like going to the testing center better than the online proctoring, because I like to, I sit here like this with my hands over my face while I take a test. They won't let you do that while you're doing online proctoring. But the solution, this AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate, is a good start for most job roles. Now, what I want to do is take a look at a couple other associate level certifications. The next up one is the Sysops Administrator Associate. I've reduced the amount of roles that map to this certification. When we talk about what we're validating with this is, when we talk about systems operation, we're not talking just about deploying, but how do we manage our deployments? How do we scale out and scale in our deployments and make sure that they're fault tolerant? So when I look at the topics that we're covering in this course, the courses associated with this certification, I look at not as much as where the Architect Associate course looks at deploying. This looks at maintaining. How do we patch our systems? How do we securely RDP or SSH into our systems to manage them? How do I manage a fleet of instances in the cloud? How do I manage multiple database services in the cloud? And how do I choose the best AWS service? So, like I said, I may have 6 different ways to deploy a web server and 12 different ways to deploy a database. What's the best for our use case? When we look at the Sysops Administrator Associate certification, we're looking at a lot of the exam questions are scenario based, and we'll be given a scenario and we'll get, choose the best out of these 5 answers. And some of them could be some of the wrong answers are potentially right if there wasn't a better answer. So choose the best one. We'll talk a lot in that course, and that certification focuses a lot on AWS operational best practices and cost control mechanisms. So even though it's not in this list of roles that map to this certification, this is something that someone that's doing advanced billing in AWS and billing management, while they may not be as interested in the technical aspects of deploying patches, they may be interested in the billing aspects of the advanced billing aspects and cost control mechanisms. Start talking about things like AWS organizations, where we have multi-account structures. How do we not only manage cost control and look at the billing and tagging on resources, but how do we limit what sub-accounts can actually do? Maybe my database admin's accounts only have access to certain parts of our AWS management console. So that's the Sysops Administrator Associate exam. Now, if there are any questions, you all are welcome to go ahead and throw a question in the chat window as we move on. Now, the third associate level certification is the AWS Certified Developer Associate. So in this certification exam, we are not validating how well you code with Java or Python or Node.js. And in fact, we do a lot of coding in the cloud in here. So with the courses, what we do is we tend to give people the choice of languages, and we give code examples in many different languages, 5 different languages, I believe, in the course. And we focus on the tools specifically in AWS that developers can use. So we look at microservices, and we touch on using containers like Docker and Amazon's Elastic Container Service and Elastic Kubernetes Service. So ECS, AWS ECS, and EKS. We'll cover that a little bit. Then we move into serverless, okay, where we talk about AWS Lambda functions and how we use those. And we have labs, and we do those in the courses. But those are sort of the topics that were covered in the developer associate. So I would look at this as, what are the tools that we use to develop cloud native applications? Okay, so when we look at the job roles that are going to map to this certification, anyone who's doing development in the cloud could make use of this course. We talk about a cloud developer, database administrator, but I also have on here, besides big data specialists, cloud architects and Sysops administrators. And there's a good reason for that. I'm going to bring up my other screen real quick. Just a moment here. I'm going to bring up my other screen here. And what I want to show you is that our systems infrastructure in AWS is now cloud, is now code. What do I mean by that? Well, if I'm a cloud architect and I'm responsible for deploying this same environment over and over and over, where I have a dev environment that has to move to test, and test now needs to move to production, how do we do that and make sure that, how are we going to make sure that we do this and it's not a manual process every time? I like to say that whenever we do a manual process in production, that's a risk without reward. Okay, the chances are, if it fails, well, that's, an RGE, a resume generating event. If it succeeds, no one pats you on the back and says, good job doing your normal day-to-day job. So what we have in AWS is we have the ability to build infrastructure as code. And we can build templates, either JavaScript object notation, or YAML, which is yet another markup language. And we have the ability to take our infrastructure and define it all in code in AWS. So the example that I've got right here is all code for me to build my daughter's Minecraft server. And I have a Minecraft server that goes out to GitHub, gets the latest version of Minecraft, and it builds it on in a Docker container in Amazon ECS. And I put Minecraft in a Docker container just because I wanted to, not because I needed to, but I needed to practice with Docker. But I have this looking at AWS from a cost point of view. I'm running on an instance that is a medium-sized instance because my daughter has to play with her 20 best friends at the same time. But so I use spot pricing in this template. So I'm only paying 1 cent an hour max for my daughter's Minecraft server when it's running, for a nice large beefy server, probably saving, 75% off the on-demand pricing. So there's a lot that goes into the code that we build just for our infrastructure. This code actually builds a virtual private cloud, sets up subnets for me, routing tables, internet gateways, all sorts of static IP addresses, DNS entries. Okay, so I can go to minecraft.trentler.net and get on my server if you're on the whitelist. So all that's done in code. So when I look back at the AWS Certified Developer Associate and we look at the job roles that match this, yeah, if you're an architect or you are a Sysops administrator, yeah, definitely start with the architect associate or the Sysops administrator associate exam. But then look at how we deploy code and deploy our infrastructure as code. And the developer associate is a good, as well as deploying Lambda-based serverless applications. An intro to this, it's also a good bit of more depth into deploying your infrastructure code base. Pretty cool. You know, sort of the fourth domain that we have with AWS certifications are specialty certifications. And specialty certifications, these are cost the same amount as the professional level certifications. These are $300 list price for an exam. Of course, you can use your 50% off discount. And you get about the same amount of time to take these. I believe these are give you about 2 hours, about 130 minutes to take these exams as well. When we look at the data analytics, machine learning, and database specialty, these are all great for developer types of roles: database administrator, big data specialists, as well as cloud architects who need a deeper dive into these topics. The advanced networking specialty uh, covers in a lot more detail and certifies that you know a lot more detail about the AWS networking environment. Specifically, how do we connect on-prem environments to our AWS networking environments once we understand them? So we talk about VPN connections as well as direct connect connections in that certification track, okay? As well as what makes up a virtual private cloud. How do we peer and transfer data from one account to another? What are the costs involved with data transfer from AWS to the internet to another region, to other instances and things of that nature? And then finally, there's the security specialty. And this is great for our security specialists, as well as systems administrators and cloud architects who need to really understand a little bit more about how IAM works. Security, we like to say, is job zero in the cloud. And every layer that we deploy has to have security involved. And all of these different security layers have to interact well with each other. Okay, so in the security specialty, we talk specifically about things like IAM, which is our access control system that controls both our built users. We talk about Amazon Cognito, federation to Active Directory, as well as external identity providers like Facebook, Amazon, Google, that nature. How do we build accounts? How do we give rights? What are our different principles? What are our resources that we can have access to? And how do we set up roles and policies in the accounts? It goes into a lot more detail than, and there's also a lot in there about Amazon Key Management Service as well. Goes into a lot more detail than the architect associate security module. Those are our specialty certifications. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for attending, and I hope that we can be of assistance with you in heading into the cloud.